Kale Rindar lived in the quietest corner of Luna Station, inside a small room that looked more like a storage unit than a home. The walls were plain metal. The bed was simple. There were no photos, no medals, no awards. Nothing in the room showed who he once was. Only the large window revealed anything grand. Earth hanging in the darkness like a glowing blue lantern. 3 years had passed since the war ended. 3 years since Kale became the most famous human in the galaxy. And 3 years since he walked away from everything and everyone. Now he worked at the water treatment plant. It was easy, silent work. The other workers recognized him, of course. Everyone in human space knew his face. But no one asked questions. They saw something in his eyes, a kind of quiet storm, and they understood that some stories should never be touched. The room was silent until the door chime rang. Kale did not move. Almost no one knew where he lived. Even fewer had permission to visit. It rang again. "Enter," Kale said, still staring at Earth. The door slid open, and a woman stepped inside wearing deep blue diplomatic robes. Her presence alone told him something serious had come. Ambassador Mira Solon. He turned just enough to see her reflection in the window. "Mira," he said, "what brings the galaxy's top diplomat to a forgotten place like this?" Mira looked around his empty room. Her face showed sadness. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "No," Kale replied. "We don't. This isn't from me." Mira stepped forward. "This message comes from the president himself." Kale gave a humorless laugh. "Tell him no." "But Kale," she continued, "the request isn't from Earth." He finally turned. "A request from who?" Mira took a slow breath. "From the Zorith Empire." The air seemed to freeze. Kale's expression hardened. "Their princess, Arinea, has formally asked to meet you." Kale felt something tighten in his chest. He turned back, toward the window. "Why would she want to see me?" "She has been studying the war," Mira said. "Especially the final battle at Kepler, 942b. Kale's hands shook for a moment. He hid them behind his back. "She wants to know why you vanished. Why the man who ended a war now lives alone on a station, working in a water plant." Kale continued staring at Earth. So calm, so normal, so blind to what had almost happened. "Tell her I'm dead," he whispered. "I tried." Myra's voice softened. "She already knows you're alive." "And Kale," she said, "if she doesn't get answers, she may advise her father to review the peace treaty." That struck him harder than any weapon ever had. If the treaty broke, if the war restarted, humanity wouldn't survive. Kale closed his eyes. "What does she want?" "Everything," Mira said. "Every detail of the final battle. Every choice you made. Every secret you've been hiding." Kale stayed silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I can't do this. You have to." Mira stepped closer. "Kale, you saved us all. Whatever happened out there, we are alive because of you." Kale finally turned to face her. His voice was soft, worn, and full of pain. "You think I'm a hero," he said. "But heroes don't do what I did." "Then what are you?" Mira asked. Kale's answer came like a cold wind. "I'm the man who stepped into the darkness and didn't come back the same." The day of the journey arrived faster than Kale expected. Luna Station felt different as he walked through its long corridors. Brighter, busier, too alive for a man who wished to disappear. He wore his old military uniform for the first time in years. It felt heavier than armor, as if every thread carried memories he wanted to forget. Ambassador Mira Solon walked beside him, speaking quietly about protocol, behavior, and proper greetings. Kale barely listened. His mind was locked somewhere else, replaying moments he had buried deep. Centauri Station awaited them, a neutral ground shared by 5 advanced species. It floated like a crystalline flower in space, each petal designed for a different kind of life. Some sections were filled with water, others with thick gas, others with shifting gravity. But the diplomatic chamber was the most beautiful part of all. Kale stepped into it with steady steps, though inside he felt the old weight returning. The walls shimmered like living glass, slowly shifting between colors. Images of distant star systems drifted across them like silent memories. 2 tall guards stood by the doors, Zorith warriors with silver skin and glowing blue eyes. Their armor moved like liquid metal. They watched Kale closely, not with hostility, but with a warrior's respect. Then the doors opened. Princess Arinea waited on the central platform. She was exactly as Kale remembered from the final war reports, tall, elegant, with shimmering silver skin that reflected the changing lights, and long white hair flowing like molten starlight. Her eyes were deep and luminous, showing both intelligence and caution. But Kale wasn't fooled by her graceful appearance. Behind those eyes was a sharp mind, trained to read people, trained to uncover truths. "Kale Rindar," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. "Your Highness," Kale replied, offering a respectful nod. "Though I'm not sure the name Kale Rindar means much anymore." Princess Arinia tilted her head. "Names have weight. Yours carries the end of a war." Kale didn't respond. The two diplomats, Mira and several Zorith advisors, moved to the edges of the room, giving Kale and the princess the center. "Please sit," Arinia said, gesturing to the two chairs facing each other. Kale sat. His uniform felt tighter. His heartbeat steadied into the old soldier rhythm. Arinia studied him quietly. "I have read every human record available about you," she said. "Your battles, your strategies, your victories. And yet none of them explain the choices you made at Kepler 942b. Kale's jaw tightened. "That battle is classified," he said. "By your people?" "Yes," Arinia replied. "But ours have fragments. Enough to show that the truth is far more complicated than what the public believes." Kale kept his eyes on hers, but inside, memories were swirling. Flashes of burning ships, red sunlight, broken transmissions. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "The truth." She leaned closer. "You disappeared after the war. You rejected every honor, every celebration, every medal. Why?" Kale exhaled slowly. "Because celebrations are for heroes. And what I became that day wasn't a hero." Arinia studied him, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "My people surrendered when our fleet was winning. Our commanders reported overwhelming fear. Not fear of defeat, but fear of what humanity would do next." Kale looked away. Outside the chamber, stars drifted slowly across the walls, as if listening. Arinia's voice softened. "I need to know what they saw." Kale finally looked up, and for a moment, the man who sat before her wasn't the quiet worker from Luna Station. He was the strategist who ended a war, the soldier who made the hardest choices. "You think you want the truth," Kale said quietly. "But once you learn what happened, once you understand what humans are capable of when pushed, your people will never see us the same way again." Arinia didn't blink. "Then it's a truth I must hear. Because my empire's future depends on understanding the past." Kale closed his eyes briefly, gathering himself. Then he opened them, and the shadow of the old soldier returned. "Very well," he said. "But your advisors must leave. And so must ours. What I'm about to say should be heard by only two people." The room grew tense. Even Mira looked uneasy. Arinia considered it carefully, and then nodded. "All of you leave us." The chamber emptied. Now only two beings remained. A princess searching for truth, and a human who carried the weight of an entire species' darkest day. Kale leaned forward. "If you want to understand Kepler 942b, he said softly, "we start from the beginning. From the moment humanity learned what extinction truly feels like." Princess Arinia waited in complete silence as Kale Rindar rested his hands on the table between them. For a moment, he didn't speak. It was as if he had to search through memories he wished had stayed buried forever. When he finally began, his voice was calm, but the weight in it was unmistakable. 3 months before the final battle, Kale said, "Your fleets reached our solar system." Arinia's expression tightened. "Earth was doomed," Kale continued. "Mars had fallen. Europa was evacuated. Titan burned. Your ships surrounded our home like a tightening fist." He didn't raise his voice, but each word landed with the force of truth. "We had maybe 2 weeks until your people began bombing Earth. Our military was collapsing. Resources gone. Morale broken." Arinia did not interrupt. She listened with the tension of someone hearing the real version of history for the first time. "We tried to fight," Kale said, "but fighting wasn't enough. And winning the war by traditional means was impossible. So you chose another path," Arinia said quietly. Kale nodded. "Dr. Helen Ross, she led something called the Prometheus Directive." Arinia leaned forward. "That name does not exist in any Zorith file." "It wasn't meant to," Kale replied. "It was classified above every level of military clearance. Only 7 humans knew about it. I was one." "What was it?" Arinia asked. Kale hesitated. "A project designed to end a war in a way no species in the galaxy had ever seen." The princess felt a faint shiver pass through her. "Kepler 942B wasn't chosen because it was strategic, Kale explained. It was chosen because we needed a battlefield far from any homeworld, far from civilians, far from everything that mattered. Arinia frowned. Your record said your fleet was prepared for honorable defeat. That was the official story, Kale replied. But here's what you don't know. He tapped the table gently. We never planned to win the battle. We planned to end the war. Arinia felt the shift in the air. Kale continued. Your empire had never faced extinction. Humans had. More than once. Our history taught us something simple, something terrifying. He looked directly at her. When humans are pushed to the edge, we don't break. We transform. Arinia swallowed. Into what? Something you don't ever want waking up again. For the first time, the princess looked uncertain. Kale leaned back, eyes distant. Before Kepler, your forces believed you understood humans. You thought we were emotional, impulsive, easy to predict, easy to discourage. Arinia nodded slowly. That is what our generals believed. That belief, Kale said softly, died on Kepler. He continued, when we arrived at the battlefield, we had 3 options created by Dr. Ross. Arinia's eyes narrowed. 3. Kale nodded. The first was a system virus. It could disable your entire fleet's navigation. No movement, no retreat, no attack. That alone could have won, Arinia said. Maybe, Kale admitted. But one weapon was not enough. The second option was biological, Kale said. A pathogen that would weaken your soldiers. Not kill, but leave them unable to fight. Arinia's expression tightened, her silver skin glowing with tension. That would have crippled us. It would have, Kale agreed. But even that wasn't enough. Arinia frowned. What was the third? Kale looked her dead in the eyes. A psychological weapon. The princess shifted. A device that could send information directly into your commander's minds. Not images. Not files. Experiences. Arinia felt her breath catch. What kind of experiences? She whispered. Kale didn't blink. Our entire history. The princess froze. All of it, Kale said. Every war. Every atrocity. Every moment humanity chose survival over mercy. Arinia's glowing eyes widened. That weapon showed your commanders what we are capable of when pushed to the brink. It showed them what happened to the 12 alien species before you. Arinia's voice shook. The ones who threatened Earth. Yes, Kale said. The ones who no longer exist. Silence filled the chamber. The walls, showing drifting stars, felt suddenly colder. But Princess, Kale said quietly, those 3 weapons were meant to be used one at a time. Each one powerful enough to force surrender. Arinia stared at him, unable to speak. Kale continued in a whisper that made her blood freeze. But on Kepler, I used all 3. Princess Arinia sat perfectly still, but her breathing had changed. The word all 3 echoed in her mind like a warning bell. Kale did not raise his voice, but the weight of his confession filled the chamber like a storm. You must understand something, Kale said quietly. The Prometheus directive was never meant to be unleashed completely. Dr. Ross designed 3 separate paths so humanity could choose the least destructive option. And you, Arinia whispered, chose all of them. Kale did not deny it. Because losing wasn't an option. Not with what we knew. Arinia leaned forward. What did you know? Kale's eyes darkened. That your empire had its own contingency. Something your generals called the final protocol. Arinia stiffened. She hadn't expected him to know the name. Our intelligence suggested, Kale continued, that if the Zorith Empire faced total defeat, you would destroy every human world in existence. All at once. No warnings. No survivors. Arinia's voice trembled slightly. It was only a theoretical plan. But I didn't know that, Kale replied. All I knew was that if humans lost the last battle, every person I loved would die. Silence stretched between them. Thick, heavy, painful. Kale stood and walked to the edge of the room where the stars drifted across the shimmering walls. When your fleet arrived at Kepler, 942b, Kale said, you outnumbered us 3-1. Your ships were faster. Your shields were stronger. You had technology we still don't fully understand. He turned slowly. We never intended to win. We intended to stop the war so completely that your empire wouldn't dare consider revenge. Arinia swallowed. Tell me what happened. Kale nodded once. The first weapon, the system virus, hit your fleet in the first few minutes. Arinia's eyes widened. It spread faster than we expected, Kale said. Within minutes, more than half of your ships lost control. Engines froze. Navigation locked. Entire formations drifted without command. Arinia let out a slow breath. That explains the confusion in our records. Kale continued. Then I activated the second weapon. The biological agent. She flinched. It was non-lethal, Kale said. That mattered to me. I didn't want to harm civilians. I didn't want to wipe out your people. Arinia looked up sharply. But you were willing to weaken all of us. Kale nodded. Yes, if it meant saving billions on my side. Her face softened slightly, not in forgiveness, but in understanding. And the third? She asked. Kale closed his eyes for a moment, as if the memory still hurt. The psychological broadcast spread across the entire Zorith chain of command. Every officer, every strategist, every admiral. They didn't just see human history, they felt it. Arinia felt a chill inside her bones. What exactly did they feel? Kale's voice grew quieter. They felt what it was like to be human in our darkest moments. To be desperate, cornered, ready to sacrifice everything to survive. He held her gaze. They felt the burning of ancient cities, the terror of chemical wars, the destructive fire of nuclear bombs. They felt the trenches, the starvation, the hopeless battles where humans kept fighting even when logic said surrender. Arinia's breath shook. Her voice came out soft. They felt the 12 species you destroyed. Kale nodded slowly. They felt why we did it, and how far we were prepared to go. The princess stared at him for several seconds. Our commanders, they broke. Kale lowered his head. They experienced the kind of fear no species is built to handle. Arinia whispered. They experienced being human. Kale didn't answer, but his silence said everything. Arinia looked down at her hands. Her silver fingers trembled faintly. Our records say the surrender happened quickly, abnormally quickly. She looked at him again. How long did it take? Kale's voice was barely above a whisper. 17 minutes. Arinia's eyes widened. 17 minutes, for an empire to fall. For an empire to understand. Kale corrected softly. That continuing the war meant extinction. The chamber was quiet. Not peaceful. Heavy, suffocating. Arinia finally asked the question she had feared most. Kale, do you regret what you did? Kale looked at the shimmering walls, then back at her. Every day, he said. But if I had not done it, there would be no humans left. Not now. Not ever. Arinia stared at him, truly seeing the man behind the legend for the first time. And that, Kale added, his voice breaking just slightly, is why I can't celebrate what I did. Because I didn't save us by being a hero. I saved us by becoming exactly what I never wanted humans to be. Princess Arinia did not speak for a long time. The room felt colder now, as if the station itself sensed the weight of what Kale had revealed. Stars drifted across the walls, glowing softly, unaware of the history unfolding in the chamber. When Arinia finally found her voice, it came out quiet and trembling. My commanders, they were never the same after the war. She looked down. Some resigned. Some disappeared. Some could not bear the memories. Kale nodded, a sad acceptance in his eyes. The psychological broadcast was meant to scare your fleet, not destroy your leaders' minds. But fear doesn't follow limits. It grows. He sat back in his chair, shoulders heavy. Your commanders saw visions of humanity's darkest hours. They felt desperation, determination, rage, grief, and a kind of cold, unstoppable willpower that no alien species has ever understood. Arinia closed her eyes briefly. They said they saw something worse than death. Kale exhaled slowly. They saw what humans are willing to become when we have no choice. That is worse than any weapon. The princess's voice softened. That is why they begged for surrender. Kale nodded once. Arinia's fingers brushed the cool surface of the table. But Kale, all this knowledge, all this power, why carry it alone? Kale gave her a tired smile. Someone had to remember the cost. Someone had to make sure humanity never uses these weapons again. And that someone was you, she whispered. Kale looked away, jaw tightening. I didn't want medals. I didn't want praise. The stories they tell about me, they're lies. I didn't win through bravery or genius. He looked directly at her again. I won because I showed your people a future so terrifying that surrender became mercy. Arinia swallowed hard. And that is what drove you into hiding. Kale nodded. I couldn't stand in front of cheering crowds knowing the truth. I couldn't wear medals when I knew the peace came from fear. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. And I didn't want to become a symbol of what humans might do again. The princess studied him, searching for the human beneath the burden. Our empire, Arinia said softly, signed the treaty faster than any war-ending agreement in our history. Many of my people believed the surrender was based on honor. Others believed it was strategic. She paused. But the commanders, they were silent. They refused to speak of the final battle. Kale nodded. Because they understood. Princess Arinia's glowing eyes met his. My father always wondered why the respect in their voices sounded like fear. Kale lowered his gaze. Because they knew what the galaxy would face if humanity was pushed again. A sharp, cold silence stretched between them. Then Arinia asked the question she feared. Kale, are there more weapons? Beyond the 3 you deployed? Kale did not answer immediately. His jaw clenched, as if wrestling with something inside himself. Finally, he spoke. There were 17. Arinia's breath caught. 17, she repeated, almost whispering. Kale nodded slowly. 17 different ways to end the war. The 3 used at Kepler were the least destructive. The princess felt her heart hammering. And the others? Kale's eyes darkened. Weapons we never wanted to use. Some physical, some digital, some biological, some psychological. Each one created to win a war in a single strike. Arinia stared at him as if seeing a stranger. Does your government know? Only the president and a few others. And even they don't know everything. Kale stood, walking toward the star-filled walls again. The truth is, the war could have ended much worse. The galaxy had no idea how close it came to losing everything. Arinia whispered. And you chose restraint. Kale turned to her with a tired smile. No, I chose the least monstrous path. But even that path still cost me my peace. The princess rose slowly from her chair. Her expression was no longer just curiosity. It was respect, fear, and something deeper. Kale Rendar, she said softly. You say you became a monster that day. He looked down. I did. But monsters destroy, she continued. You saved billions, human and Zorith. Kale shook his head. Only because surrender came fast. If they had resisted, I don't know what I would have done. And that uncertainty is what keeps me awake every night. Arinia stepped closer. You saved us by carrying a truth heavy enough to break anyone else. Kale met her gaze, surprised by the sincerity. And for the first time, the princess did not look like an enemy or a diplomat. She looked like someone who finally understood the man behind the legend. The chamber felt different now, not like a meeting room, but like a place where 2 worlds finally saw each other clearly. Princess Arinia stood in silence, trying to breathe normally, but Kale's revelations had shaken her to the core. Still, she forced herself to continue. Kale, she said softly, I must ask one more thing, something that has stayed hidden even from our highest council. Kale slowly turned toward her, waiting. Arinia hesitated. Our official record states that the surrender was strategic. But privately, the commanders said something else. Kale raised an eyebrow. What did they say? The princess's glowing eyes dimmed. They said you didn't just show them humanity. You showed them what humanity was preparing to become. Kale's face tightened. Arinia watched him closely. What did they see, Kale? What was humanity ready to do if the battle continued? Kale didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the center of the room and stood beneath the drifting stars on the wall. His voice, when it came, was low and full of old hurt. They saw extinction, he said. Not yours. Ours. Arinia frowned. I don't understand. Kale looked up at the shimmering lights above them. At Kepler, 942b, we were ready to sacrifice every human ship in that battle if it meant stopping the final protocol. We were prepared to burn our own fleet, destroy our own colonies, erase every human presence that could be targeted. Arinia froze. You were willing, she whispered, to destroy yourselves, to stop us from using that plan? Kale nodded. If humanity was going to die, he said, we weren't going to die on our knees. We were going to make sure your people never forgot us. Arinia put a hand over her mouth, horrified. That's madness. Kale gave a faint, broken laugh. That's survival. When a species has its back against the wall, it stops thinking like a civilization and starts thinking like a cornered animal. He turned back toward her. Humans don't surrender, princess. Not when extinction is on the table. Arinia stepped closer, struggling to understand. But you didn't do any of that. You chose a different path. Kale's shoulders sank. Barely. And only because your commanders broke in time. The princess lowered her eyes, then lifted them again with new fear. Kale, if the surrender had taken longer, just a few minutes, would humanity have used those other weapons? Kale exhaled slowly. If we had no choice, he admitted, yes. The war would have ended in the destruction of both our peoples. Arinia felt her heart throb painfully. And only one person stood between peace and complete annihilation. Kale nodded. Me. The princess whispered. No wonder you disappeared. No wonder you couldn't face the celebrations, or the medals, or the stories written about you. Kale closed his eyes, voice soft. How can I celebrate a victory that almost ended both our civilizations? Arinia moved toward him, her silver skin glowing softly in the dim light. You didn't end us, she said gently. You stopped the worst future possible. You saved us. Kale shook his head. I didn't save anyone. I just delayed disaster. Peace built on fear doesn't last. And yet, Arinia stepped closer, her voice steady. The last 3 years have been the most peaceful in our history. Kale didn't reply. Arinia continued. Our schools teach human languages. Our children play with yours on neutral worlds. Our art, our science, our trade, they are growing together, not apart. Kale finally looked at her. That peace exists, Arinia said, because you held back. Because you didn't let humanity become the full monster it could be. Kale's voice trembled faintly. But the monster is still inside me. I feel it every time I remember Kepler. The princess approached him until they were only a few steps apart. Then let me carry some of it, she said softly. You should not bear this burden alone. Kale blinked, stunned. Why would you do that? Because peace is not kept by one person, Arinia replied. It is kept by 2 species choosing understanding over fear. She reached out her hand, not as an enemy, not as a diplomat, but as someone who had finally seen the full truth. Kale Rindar, she whispered, you carried the weight of humanity for too long. Let me carry the weight of my people's fear. Kale looked at her hand, unsure. Then slowly, almost painfully, he placed his hand in hers. In that moment, something changed. Not in one man, not in one princess, but in the fragile future of 2 civilizations that had once come so close to destroying each other. The burden was no longer his alone. For a long moment, Kale and Princess Arinia stood in silence, their hands lightly touching, the past hanging between them like a shadow neither had asked for, but both now shared. Outside the chamber walls, stars drifted by in slow patterns, as if the universe was watching 2 enemies finally understand one another. Arinia was the first to speak. Kale, she said softly, I didn't come here to judge you. I came because my people fear yours, and fear grows when truth is hidden. Kale pulled his hand back gently. Some truths break more than they heal. Only when held alone, Arinia replied. Her voice was steady now, stronger, clearer, carrying the weight of her empire. You think you became a monster, she said, but I see something else. You made a choice no one should ever face. And instead of destroying us, you saved us. Kale looked away. Your commanders didn't see a savior. They saw what humanity could become. They saw extinction in human form. And yet, Arinia said firmly, you chose restraint. You chose a path that spared billions. Kale didn't respond. Arinia stepped forward. You are not the monster from Kepler, Kale Rindar. You're the guardian who stood between 2 dying civilizations and refused to let either fall. Kale let out a slow breath. I wish I could believe that. Arinia gave him a small, sad smile. Then let someone else believe it for you. The chamber doors opened softly. Admiral Joran Hale stepped inside, the same commander Kale once served under. His hair had turned silver, but his eyes still carried the steel of a man who had lived through too many battles. Your Highness, Joran said, bowing. Kale stiffened. You weren't supposed to be here. Princess Arinia requested me. The Admiral replied, voice calm. She wanted a second witness to whatever decision she makes next. Kale looked confused. Decision? Arinia nodded. Yes, one that will affect both our species. She breathed deeply, then spoke. I will not report the full truth of Kepler, 942b. My people are not ready to know how close we came to extinction. But I will tell my father something far more important. Kale waited. I will tell him humanity is a species that chooses peace when it has the strength to destroy. A species dangerous enough to fear and wise enough to trust. Kale opened his mouth, but she held up a hand. And I will recommend something even greater than fear or peace. She looked at Kale with a certainty that surprised even him. I will recommend an alliance. The words echoed across the chamber like a promise carved from steel. Admiral Hale blinked in surprise. An alliance? After everything we did? Arinia nodded. Yes, because any species that produces someone like Kale Rindar is a species we want standing beside us, not against us. Kale stared at her, stunned. You don't have to do that. I do. Her voice softened. Because your burden is too heavy to carry alone. She turned toward the door, then paused. Kale, she said gently. The galaxy needs guardians, not ghosts. Kale froze. And you, she continued, are not done being one. He looked down, voice cracking slightly. I'm tired, princess. I know, she said. But no guardian stands alone forever. Let my people share the weight now. For the first time in years, Kale felt something shift inside him. Not relief, not forgiveness, but a sense that maybe, just maybe, the monster he feared inside him had become something else. Something better. Princess Arinia gave a respectful bow. Thank you for saving us, even when we did not deserve it. She turned to Admiral Hale. Escort him back to Luna Station. He has carried enough darkness for a lifetime. As she walked toward the exit, she stopped one last time and looked back. Kale Rindar, she whispered, you did not become a monster that day. You became the mirror that showed us what we could have become. And you stopped us before we fell. Her final words were soft but powerful. And from this day forward, you will not stand in the shadows alone. I will share the burden and ensure that both our species choose peace over fear. Then she was gone. Kale stood in silence as Admiral Hale placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You did the impossible, Kale, the Admiral said. You saved them. You saved us. And now, the princess wants to save you. Kale looked out at the drifting stars one more time. For the first time since the war, the stars didn't feel accusing. They felt quiet, at peace. Maybe, he thought, the galaxy was finally ready to heal. And maybe, just maybe, so was he.